Hello, and thank everyone for joining. Allow me to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Building Your Brand from the Inside Out, Turn Employee Experience into Customer Success. Before we jump right in, I'll just start with some introductions. My name is Darren Jennings, and I'm with Interact, and I look after sales for new business sales for Interact in the US here. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Interact, we are an off-the-shelf internet product that focuses on communication, collaboration, and improving business efficiency. And we really do this by focusing on the needs of the employee, all while making it incredibly easy for communicators to engage people within their organizations, regardless of what role they have or what device they prefer to engage with that information. Now, today's topic is a very interesting one for me personally and for Interact as a business because we've seen time and again how organizations are able to see real business value by focusing inward on that employee experience. And this isn't always clear, I think, in the minds of a lot of organizations who see internal comms or employee engagement initiatives as simply having some peripheral internal benefits. But I think as you'll hear today, there are true quantifiable external benefits that are able to impact a company's brand and profitability by focusing on enhancing that employee experience. So with that, I will introduce my partners for today's webinar. We're joined by Ben Clark, who's a senior designer at Instinctif Partners, and also joined by Alice O'Neill, who is a partner at Instinctif Partners, and they're going to be leading most of the discussion for today's topic. Now, before we jump into the presentation today, just a bit of housekeeping. We are using GoToWebinar today for this webinar presentation, and we are by nature collaborative people, so please do ask questions via the GoToWebinar toolbar, which is on the right side of your screen. We will be answering these questions at the end of today's webinar, and apologies if we don't get to yours during the actual webinar presentation today. If so, we will follow up with you offline. But feel free to submit your questions as they come up. We'll leave time at the end of the presentation to get to them. Now with that, I'm going to turn it over to my friends at Instinctif Partners to lead our discussion today.
Thanks very much, Darren, and thank you for inviting us to participate. We're very happy to be here with you today. So some very quick introductions before we kick off. For those of you that don't know us, Instinctif is one of the fastest growing business communication companies. We're made up of 6 key practices, from PR, life sciences, and public policy to engagement, which is a practice that Ben and I represent. We are lucky enough to help some of the world's best loved brands engage with their customers, their employees, and their external stakeholders. But ultimately, no matter which audience we're helping companies engage with, what we're really focused on is helping big brands deliver their promises. Sounds simple, right? All you need to do is align all employees and encourage them to behave in the same way every day, every time they interact with a customer. As communicators, all of you joining us today will know that's getting harder and harder to do. And particularly in the age of digital communication, where connections between consumers, employees, and organizations are so much more immediate and transparent, failing to deliver the brand promise can be exposed in minutes, risking reputation and eroding consumer and employee trust at the same time. Technology is continuing to disrupt business models worldwide. It's fundamentally changing the workplace, our ways of working, how we communicate, connect, and ultimately live our lives. And in organizations, however, digital breaks down barriers of geography, department, hierarchy, and generation. And as communicators, that's really music to our ears. But more than ever before, we need to start adapting our engagement strategies and leveraging digital platforms in really fresh and dynamic ways so that we can stay relevant and compete with how people are experiencing digital in the outside world. We also need to start to influence leaders to do 2 things. Firstly, to embrace digital as a driver of engaged and connected audiences and therefore growth. And secondly, to just stop segmenting between the internal and external audiences. Today, employees can often be both customers and investors too, and many channels reach both and all of your audiences. There is no barrier between them any longer.
Yeah. Hi, Alice. This is Darren. I think this is a tremendously important point about segmenting the internal and the external. I mean, companies spend billions on brand awareness, on social media campaigns, things like tone of voice, but yet for some reason, this hasn't carried through to an internal audience as much, or at least I haven't seen it very often. Now, in our own world of intranets at Interact, it's all about internal comms, and we truly do see how hard this can be to have an authentic tone of voice and people looking at these as two different distinct audiences. But from your perspective, is this simply because companies haven't thought about it in these terms, or they just don't know how to do it, or do you think it's something else?
I think it's really complicated. I just don't think that companies are thinking about it in that way. I mean, intellectually, most organizations have definitely got their heads around employee engagement, and I think they do see the value in ensuring their people are delivering for their customers, but they're still not investing. They may be investing in elements that definitely enable employees, but they're still not thinking about how they can truly build the brand from the inside out. That's just not happening yet.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, great. Thank you.
So we thought we'd spend the next 10 minutes or so running through some examples that highlight how well-known brands leverage digital platforms and use gamification to engage their people. At the core of each project that we're going to talk you through is a connected brand experience that is rooted in brand purpose, drives collaboration, and encourages user-generated content and interactivity. Ben, over to you.
Thanks, Alice. So the first project we'd like to look at is a project we worked on with Coach, which is a brand with a really, really very rich heritage, but they're now on a journey to become the very definition of modern luxury. So not over-relying on that tradition that's behind them. They're looking to be a modern brand. With an aggressive brand transformation underway worldwide, Coach set us the challenge of connecting its 15,000 strong and globally quite disparate team with a new fashion-forward, digitally savvy Coach brand. They also wanted at the same time to create an opportunity to celebrate their 70th anniversary. So we defined an approach that brought those two things together by focusing on three key things. Firstly, it was about celebrating the authenticity, curiosity and energy of the brand, and not just what that meant for the company, but what that meant for individuals, people, employees working for the company. So, people have pride in the brand, and that should be celebrated. Secondly, we wanted to involve employees by asking them, what's your Coach story? There's a really rich vein of storytelling within the business, and we wanted to tap into that. And then thirdly, using the employee voice to attract new talent and connect people with the endless possibilities that Coach offers.
Ben, I'm sorry to interject, but I just had this was such an interesting one, I think, around using the employee voice. I think it's incredibly important, and in the world of internal communications, though, it's often viewed as a big risk to expose the employee voice even to an internal audience, let alone to an external one. Now, I'm curious as to how you've helped companies, maybe even Coach, for example, understand the upside to employee voice and overcome any perceived risk that they might say something bad or maybe not approved.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a good question. It's certainly a consideration that, when we were working through this project that came up. At a base level, we did have low-level moderation in place. So we could, filter out anything that was just plain unacceptable. And that's, the sort of thing you do in any online channel community. And most audiences these days are used to a certain level of decorum and the correct way to behave online. Having said that, it's important to have a social media policy, and a lot of big brands and big businesses are putting those in place nowadays. And employees do understand that there are levels and standards you have to adhere to. Having said all of that, the benefits of having a very authentic, unedited employee voice is always going to outweigh the potential risks of something negative coming up. So you tap into so much personality and so much genuine voice that, a brand could never really achieve by talking in a single corporate voice. If you get lots of different voices telling individual stories that tie together, tell a really strong, engaging brand story that's so much more powerful. And when you're dealing with negative stories, unfortunately, if they exist, they're going to be out there. Whatever you do, whether it's online or goes underground, it's just word of mouth. So if you have that negativity within your business and you're worried about it, you really have to ask yourself, is the best approach to try and squash it, or do you be a bit more open and honest about it? And as we all know, the best communication goes two ways, so it's a good place to start a conversation, really.
That's very interesting. Great, thank you.
No, thanks, Darren. So for the campaign, we centered it around a hashtag, Life at Coach. It's a digital social experience, and we created that to sort of celebrate the passion that Coach employees have for the company. So the concept of hashtags, obviously, everyone understands how to use them, and that simplicity was one of the key things we were looking for. So the hashtag enables people to showcase what working at Coach really means to them, and at the same time harness their love of social media. This campaign wasn't about building and it's something that's expensive and polished and overly top-down that felt overly curated. It was about enabling and inspiring employees to tell and share their Coach story, both internally and externally, using channels that exist already and they use on a day-to-day basis like Twitter and Instagram. And the audiences span different geographies and different functional areas, so we knew how to make it simple, so the campaign could be used by those multiple audiences around the world. To help drive participation in the campaign, we identified and engaged a host of brand influencers within the company to submit content pre-launch to help create some buzz and really kick the campaign off. And then to keep people sharing and updating their stories, we used a number of theme-based pushes that help to drive and maintain momentum. So, for instance, using various digital channels such as email and WhatsApp with the in-store teams, we asked Coach employees how Coach inspired them on a personal level, or how Coach enabled them to celebrate their individuality or their own individual style. The campaign played out both internally and externally, so not only did we manage to break down those internal barriers, but we also given potential employees via the Careers at Coach site a sneak peek of what it's like to work at the brand. So I'd like to summarize sort of three key takeaways from this. So the first key takeaway is leverage the digital channels your people are using every day to bring your audiences together and create a sense of community. So secondly, engage your people in celebrating your company's pivotal moments. So with Coach, that was their 75th anniversary, but for other businesses, it could be a product launch or the launch of a new strategy. It's really important to get your people engaged in those milestones. And thirdly, don't be afraid to use the raw and unedited employee voice to attract new talent and connect with customers. Your people are often your biggest advocates, and brands are built from the inside out, after all. So that was a project we worked on with Coach. I'd now like to hand back over to Alice to talk about how we've used gamification to drive engagement with some of our other clients.
Thanks, Ben. So we've also worked with lots of very different organisations to drive engagement through gamification. For the last 3 years, our work with one global technology company has been focused very much on leveraging their intranet platform to get employees connecting with the company strategy and collaborating over the issues that are really impacting the customer experience. The client wanted digital to play a really important role in how they communicate internally. They don't just want their intranet to be a news hub or document repository. They use digital as a tool to help them really achieve their strategic objectives and engage their people. So we've used digital to help employees connect with one another, encouraging sharing skills and knowledge. A really simple concept, but actually a key part of getting employees to pay it forward and share their expertise with one another. We also kicked off a series of focused online hackathon sessions, which included online ideation and problem-solving activities that really kind of tapped into the skills capabilities across the business to solve real business issues. Again, using the intranet as a platform to really bring together different thinking, driving collaboration, new perspectives and ideas too. This year, we launched an immersive digital scenario game that really challenges employees to put themselves in control of delivering an outstanding customer experience. So to help us create that immersive experience, we incorporated the principles of gamification to help engage and motivate people to take part in the scenario-based game that brought to life the customer journey and encourage people to think about how they could make a real difference. I think gamification is a buzzword that really gets thrown around a lot, but the basic idea is really simple. If you turn tasks into a game where you are rewarded for key achievements and recognized by your peers for doing so, you'll feel more motivated to do something. So, Fitbits are a classic example of this. You're challenged to achieve a set number of steps in a day, you're ranked against friends, and ultimately motivated to take part. Gamification is built upon kind of 10 primary game mechanics that you can see here, which are proven to motivate and really engage users. So if you kind of start at the top, you need to give fast feedback, so players see an immediate response to feedback or actions. You've got to be transparent, so people know exactly where other players are in the game and where they rank. You need to set clear goals on what's to be achieved, what is it that you're asking people to do, and then provide rewards, and that can be anything from badges or points being rewarded, or people obtaining a variety of different levels, so people can really demonstrate their accomplishments. And really crucially, you've got to build a sense of community and competition too, because that'll help you drive participation.
Alice, just a question on gamification. Can you explain the process for introducing this, or even introducing the concept to your customers? Do you tend to roll it out all at once with maybe multiple games to drive behaviors, or do you do a phased approach? Can you tell us a little bit about that introduction process, please?
Yes, absolutely. The process, to be quite honest, will vary dramatically depending on the complexity of the project and the client that we're working with, because, you really can gamify absolutely anything. And it can be as straightforward as just adding some fun functionality that encourages, collaboration to an existing solution the organization might be already using. If it's a more complex project, then typically we will kind of, chunk the process down into several different phases. So, to give you an example, phase 1 might begin with determining the outcome that we're looking to achieve, selecting the right solution, deciding the experience that we want people to have, and then mapping the journey that we're going to take them on. Phase 2 will then involve co-creating content with employees and working incredibly closely with both kind of our design team and project management teams. Phase 3 is always around kind of in-depth testing and validation, which is absolutely crucial to making sure that, not only is the content is resonating, but also that the technology is fit for purpose for that particular organization. Phase 4 will always involve some sort of pilot, whether that's over a month or two, or it might be something that's very accelerated. Phase 5 will be launch, and then phase 6, which is where we see a lot of gamification and digital projects fail, and I'm sure it's the same for you guys at Interact, is driving adoption and really ensuring that uptake remains really high post-launch.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I totally agree with you on the adoption piece. We see that as well with Interact. When you're introducing a new intranet to an organization who may never have had one, or perhaps they're operating from a really legacy system that didn't really serve any purpose other than a repository of documents, sometimes there's an adoption obstacle if you're introducing too many features at once, especially within an intranet. And so we typically would recommend a phased launch approach over a period of 6, 12, or perhaps even 18 months, where you're trickling new features in. And the benefits of maybe introducing everything at once would be a large spike in engagement, but the downside is you get a slow trickling off of that engagement over a period of time. Whereas we've found if you introduce additional features within your intranet or digital workspace, you have small peaks of engagement and then a slight drop-off and an additional peak as new features are introduced over time. So the line is actually continually going up and to the right in terms of engagement with the internet. So it's interesting to see that that's mirrored within the gamification elements that you're driving.
Great. So in summary, there are 3 key things that we think you can do to help ensure that your digital engagement campaigns are successful. connect your employees with your brand promise and strategy, and ultimately drive lasting change for your organization. The first, find your influencers. So drive early adoption and involvement from your peer networks. Absolutely lead from the top, but you've got to engage from within. Uptake and change happens within the organization. So select the real influencers, not simply the most senior or the highest performers, and give them a first look at everything that you're introducing so they can onboard others, become embedded trainers, and kind of have a sense of ownership over the program that you're rolling out. Secondly, focus on adoption, not launch. Again, as Darren mentioned, it's easy to see launch as the end game and to focus on the first days and weeks, but the truth is that launching is the easy part. Maintaining for the long term to create sustained change is really hard. You have to find meaningful ways of making digital useful to employees so that what's in it for me is really clear. And finally, don't be afraid of just keeping it simple. People are really time poor, and it's really important to make what you do intuitive and easy to use. So that's everything from us. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Alice and Ben from Instinctif. This was really interesting. We've had quite a few questions that have come across from the GoToWebinar toolbar, and I think we'll start with a couple of them. Now, the first one that's come in really, I think, probably makes sense, Alice, for you to take, which is related to the gamification you just mentioned. It says, now, who in the organization do you typically deal with on a gamification project?
So co-creation is really central to our approach for this type of project and validation. So we tend to actually engage and align multiple stakeholders within an organization at every stage of the project. And it's really key to implementing a game or a digital project successfully. So, in the project that we just talked about, for example, we were engaging people from HR teams, subject matter experts, so that we could ensure that the content was really robust, so they came from each of the business units. We also had a really big IT team working with us to ensure that our kind of tech solution would work within that particular organization. And then we also had a focus group of employees who worked with us not only on the co-creation, but also on that kind of crucial validation piece. And you really can't underestimate the power of involving as many people as possible in that process, because it helps kind of create this groundswell of support for the project before you even launch and roll out, and then they feel a sense of ownership, and that buzz tends to kind of carry on through the organization.
That's great. Excellent. So we've got a second question that's come through, and this one says, how do we help convince senior leaders about the importance of this? And I'm assuming that this is an internal employee engagement or kind of in collaboration with an internet project. From our perspective, I suppose when it comes to engaging senior leaders, if you don't have the support of leadership or the very, very top of the organization, there is a risk that the project is going to fall down, because these types of initiatives tend to be successful when you have senior leaders that are actively participating and engaged and understand and recognize the true value. I also recognize that that's always oftentimes easier said than done. So I would recommend that if you are having trouble or if you have some skeptical senior leaders, the thing to do is to make an argument to them or present a case to them in terms that they find valuable. Things like ROI and enhanced earnings per share that you start to recognize when employees are more engaged, lower risk to the business by having a single platform for information, and presenting these in a very coherent, easy to understand way, because that's the kind of thing I think that is going to bring those senior leaders into your line of thinking. So having a coherent business case that focuses on things that matter to those senior leaders, I think is a great way to start with it. And if they're open to it, you might even ask them to participate in an engagement workshop or a strategy workshop around what the organization stands to benefit by embarking on a project around internal communications or collaboration and engagement, and maybe even make it clear to them that what their role would be. And I think a lot of times, from my experience, senior leaders tend to look at this like this is an additional responsibility that they'd have to take on, and they have a business to run. And they may not look at this like, well, this isn't going to be a massive drain on your time. Look at this as an opportunity to, in a very authentic way, engage with all of the employees or workers within your organization in a very meaningful, authentic way on a digital platform. And there are all sorts of things that you can do from a product perspective to introduce ghostwriters perhaps, or who might be blogging on your behalf, or simply from time to time doing a microblog or a timeline post. You can do it from a mobile device even. So I think making it very clear to the leaders that this isn't necessarily an additional burden that they're going to have to go with, but that simply their support will make the case implicitly to the organization. This is something that the senior leaders adopt, and we think this is valuable to the business, and you're going to start to see those impacts being driven throughout the rest of the organization. So hopefully that helps. Obviously, it's a very complex question, but I think that's really a good way to start it off.
I'd completely agree with you, actually, Darren, because I think, connecting what you're doing with key business objectives is absolutely crucial, and really clearly demonstrating to leaders how the projects will help employees drive growth and ultimately drive the business forward.
Totally agree. Excellent. Well, I appreciate it. Well, I believe that is all the time we have for today's webinar. I'm sorry if we haven't gotten to all of the questions that have been submitted today, and I do apologize, but if we haven't gotten to yours today, we will certainly follow up with you offline, either from Interact side or from Instinctif side. And additionally, we will be making the presentation slides from today's webinar available to all of the attendees, so those will be coming across shortly. I'd like to thank my friends at Instinctif Partners for joining us today, and thank all of you for attending, and I wish you all an excellent rest of the day, and thank you for coming.